But hi, everyone. So excited for our third book club meeting for Rewildology. This has been so much fun ever since Katie and I launched this, and we'll definitely get into her introduction too. But today we are going to discuss the amazing Path of the Puma book. Can't wait to get into this. And just for those who don't know me, my name is Brooke. I am the founder and host of Rewildology, and we decided to launch this amazing book club to bring our amazing audience in direct contact with the amazing authors that I've met through the show and have the opportunity to talk to. So it's like, spread the love. Everybody needs to learn them, meet them too. So with that introduction, I will go ahead and just turn it for Katie. If you would like to introduce yourself and what you do.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone that will be tuning in. I am Katie Propp. I am a conservation leader, and I most recently was working at a penguin nonprofit. So, Jim, I really enjoyed that penguin crossover chapter. And of course, I am the book club moderator for Rewildology. So yeah, we're just really excited to kick off another book club with Jim here, and we'll be asking him a bunch of questions. But Brooke, I want to turn it back to you to share a little bit more about the Patagonia series.
Yeah, so the reason why we chose this book, it was actually Haslina's idea, who's highly involved with rewildology, is she's like, why don't we choose a book that actually discusses the Patagonia region that the series is about? I'm like, it's genius. And so I did some research and found, Path of the Puma through Patagonia books, which we had Doug Chadwick, who wrote The Wolverine Way, which was our last book. And so it was just super serendipitous. I reached out and we were like, absolutely. Jim is amazing. He will totally love to join. So it was just perfect for this. And yeah, for those who have not heard Where the Wild Calls, a journey through Patagonia's route of parks. One of the big topics and species was pumas, of course. So we wanted to have a book that went in line with that. And then the other two pillars of the Project Patagonia is experience. We have a trip. So for those who would like to come experience pumas, meet Nico, the star guest of episode 2 of the series, and trek the amazing, he's dropping the chat, and then trek the amazing vistas of Patagonia, come down next March and April with us. And then the last one is protect. We're doing a huge fundraiser with Panthera to hopefully raise at least $20,000. That's the goal. Obviously more would be better, for the Blinka project with Nico, who's doing work in Puma coexistence work in Patagonia, the US, and Saudi Arabia. That's like where this tech is being tried out in. So hopefully all those things, we could do all of that, but that is Project Patagonia. And that is why we chose this book and why the amazing Jim is here to join. And just really fast, I'll just get into some rules. I mean, they're pretty straightforward. Just be nice. Like, don't stir the pot. You're allowed to say whatever you want, but don't intentionally say things that are just inflammatory. We are recording. This will be posted on YouTube. So just everybody, so you know that. I think it's all. Are there any other rules I missed? I think that's good. Yeah,
no,
you know the rules.
That's good.
Just be a nice person. Awesome, Katie. I will send it to you for conversation. Go for it.
I think without further ado, let's talk to Jim. Jim's been sitting here. So Jim, we're just really excited to talk to you. And if you want to do a little bit of an intro, please feel free, and then we can jump right into questions.
Sure, it's a pleasure to be with you, and I love to see you all of the future, young energy and interest in the topic. And just so you know, Doug Chadwick's my neighbor here in Whitefish. We're good friends. He was my writing coach. He wrote the foreword to my book. He's an incredible human. It's a small world in conservation, really. And if you read the book, I mean, it's a small world from here to Patagonia. We have so much in common. I was a wildlife biologist, wildlife program manager. I retired as the director of Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks up here in Northwest Montana about 3 years ago. And I've been working with land trusts, protecting land ever since. So it took me a long time in my career. I got to build grizzly bear programs, conflict research, wolf programs, research, conflict, lions, you name it. But the land started getting chewed up, particularly around COVID. So after 31 years as a biologist, I jumped to the land trust world And so now I connect donors to them to protect, ungulate migrations or large carnivore connectivity, the spaces between public lands, right? And for a while, I thought, we don't have to worry about public lands. That's not where the fight is. Wow, that's going to come back. And so now they're both, important to work on again, which is interesting. Okay, things kind of come full circle. But yeah, no, been a wildlife biologist for going on 4 decades.
And if anyone here has read your book, they know a whole lot more. So I want to dive into a little bit about your childhood. In the beginning of the book, you talk about your Midwest upbringing and then your time spent like in your youth in California and then in Florida. How does where you live impact your love for wildlife and nature?
It's a good question, and most all of us, when we're a child, and if we're fortunate enough to have the help to go outside, right, you're going to get inspired by nature. It doesn't matter where you're at. And Iowa, man, I was in corn country. We had cattle, feedlots, and I was an asthmatic and allergies. This is just miserable. It's humid, and I just thought that's the way life is, right? And anyway, as happenstance would have it, I got pretty familiar with animals growing up on a farm, and we lost that farm in the late 60s. Parents split up, and it's as traumatic as that is, it changed my life for the better, honestly. I landed in San Diego. I could breathe, and I was like, surfing was a lot more fun than farm work. And I got to San Diego in a magical time when it's probably twice the amount of people there now. But I stuck my head underwater one day and my buddies, and we all picked up snorkels and masks, and we're all into free diving because it didn't cost a lot of money. You have to, buy tanks or take scuba classes, and just inspired me, became a marine biologist. And then the San Diego State, Florida State, Montana State, the kind of the succession of colleges and adventures, just, you never know where things are going to lead. You just go with it.
I mean, absolutely. It's so interesting how like where you live and what you have access to kind of changes what your interests are in, and that love for the ocean, and to become a marine biologist and then study Pumas and have this background though also with farmers obviously came into play later on in your life as well. But I guess my next question is you just are someone who is so persistent in what you've studied, and with wildlife you were very determined, and I could really see that from reading your book, that you were like, well, I'm moving to Montana to pursue my dreams. So what wisdom would you give others for that example of chasing after what you want?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, and in the nonprofit world, I've learned a lot, particularly the last 10 years. The world has changed socially and culturally. Really, I'm the epitome of a privileged white male, even though, we didn't have anything. I had a single mom, but I didn't face any barriers, no gender barriers, no people of color barriers, right? And so I started to realize that, and I wanted to make sure to honor that with good. All my buddies, I watched what happened to them growing up in San Diego and Florida that were people of color, and made me realize more and more, it's like, you got to do good in this world. and I really took that to heart, and it took a good 15, 20 years, but persistence, it doesn't matter where you come from, who you are, what your beliefs are. I hired and fired for at least 20 years in government in a wildlife agency. It is all about relationships and being a person that's enthusiastic and fun to be around. You get stacks of resumes, and then I remember the men and women that volunteered, and you get to meet them and see their energy and passion. That you can go wherever you want. I believe that you can still do that if you don't give up and stick to it, and just develop those relationships, stay enthusiastic, don't lose that childhood wonder. That's a big deal, because that's your curiosity later on as a scientist, right? You never want to lose that sense of wonder. And I still have it to this day. I have to remind myself at times, but I still have it. And so, yeah, no, persistence is a funny thing. I didn't face barriers that some have and will, but it's enthusiasm and relationships that'll get you there regardless.
Yeah, I think that that sums it up. I mean, here we all are connecting.
Mhm.
And it's like you said in the beginning, all of these networks, everyone's interconnected. And even if you're working in a different species or in a different space, if you care about wildlife, if you care about conservation, there is a thread that kind of connects everybody together. And I also love, yeah. And I also love the statement you said too about having this sense of wonder, because that's what science is. It's curiosity. And you ask so many great questions throughout the book. Even the last chapter, there are like millions of questions that we still have questions and no answers to yet. But what surprised you the most during your time doing Puma research?
Well, so first I'll preface it by the research aspect, hands-on as a scientist in the field, really wasn't that long. I got thrown because I enjoy people. I ended up in a position where I was supervising people rather quickly. Most scientists don't want to work with people. They want to be in the field. Most biologists, fish, wildlife, marine, you name it, they want to work on their craft. They want to work with the species they're passionate about. They don't want to work with people. I'm a little strange. I enjoy the people part. I always have. And you can probably tell in the book. So, probably 4 different research projects. I guess, and even helping, I funded a bunch of research and mentored a bunch of younger folks too the last 30 years. And I think the one thing that surprises me about cats in particular, because I've actually probably spent more time grizzly bear issues up here where I'm at, just because of geography. Cats are wonderful because they're not on anyone's radar until they do something that we perceive as wrong. They're out there and we don't know it, but they're there. But grizzly bears and wolves are visible. Wolves run down a road and howl and make noise where people are, and grizzly bears just don't care. They're just going to show up where they show up. But for cats, what amazes me is how stealthy and cryptic and unseen they have been up until the advent of these ring cameras and door cameras and trail cameras. And now all of a sudden, folks see them where, you can just Google online and you're going to see videos of cats that you'd never see. I mean, I've followed them with telemetry, old school telemetry, and then new school telemetry. Even with new school, it's very difficult to see them, unless you're out in the field all day and you're lucky, honestly, because they can be 15 feet away in a bush and you're not going to see it. You're going to get a signal. You're not going to see it. But so anyway, to answer your question, they're so incredibly cryptic that is that's the reason they're still here in my mind. We humans have a nasty little habit of taking out anything that competes with us or threatens us. So it's the reason we still have sharks, right? Because they're underwater. It's harder to eliminate them. And that's the reason we eliminated grizzly bears. You could. They were on land and they're big and they're, you know what I mean? So anyway, the thing that amazes me throughout the common thread through all the research, I don't care whether you're in Argentina or Chile or Paraguay or here or British Columbia, they're stealthy animals. Now, the exception is, for whatever reason, and no one's teased it out yet, those cats down in southern Patagonia, whether you're in, the Tompkins parks or Torre del Paine or wherever, they're out in the open. And they've been persecuted for generations by that gaucho culture, for livestock, right? And a threat. But those cats, when you stop killing them, they're out in the open and the people can watch them. And that's unique on the planet. Everywhere else north of there, even in protected areas, they're not out in the open like that. No one knows why. So anyway, that's my long answer to your short question.
I love it. I love it. It's like, give us all the info. We want to absorb all of it. I do want to give some time for Michelle and James. If you guys have a question for Jim to ask, if you want to put a hand up so we can not overlap with our voices.
No, that's fine. Actually, I just realized, though, when you're talking about Pumas and Patagonia, I'm just remembering NBC had the America's docuseries just a while back, and the panther was actually featured as a part of them. They were talking about the Patagonia and the Southern Range, and I tend to forget, but then quickly realize like how adaptive the species. I mean, this species is like found in northern extent of like central Canada, west central Canada, going all the way down to Cape Horn. Like, it's amazing the extent of their range, including like the big cats, like as you mentioned, stealthy, but very adaptable in terms of environment, found in variety of ecosystems going from Canada down to the Cape Horn.
And if you think about it too, another cool thing as a kind of predation ecology, you know, cats take down prey that are their size or larger. All the other cats take out, you know, they group up. They're either social cats in Africa, but these pumas can take down a bull elk and even a bull moose at times, or a horse. had that happen too. They're incredible stock ambush predators.
I want to hear more about this horse story. What happened? Can we ask?
Well, over on the Blackfeet Nation, which is just east of me, where the prairie meets the Rockies at the Canadian border in Glacier Park, you know, we had to respond with the Department of Agriculture to what was classified legally in statute, and it varies by state, as agricultural loss, where you'd have to respond and, you know, do you remove the animal, trap it, whatever. And oh yeah, horses. So they can take down an adult horse, no problem, especially a big male cat. Then it's not common. Their search image is incredibly consistent with a deer-sized or Wanako-sized animal, if you will, down south. You know, Wanakos and alpacas down there, and white-tailed deer, mule deer in particular, and elk. They key in on elk calves, mule deer adults, white-tailed adults. That's their search image for prey. And that's why we really don't have the human conflicts. We get them, but considering how many millions of people are out in their habitat, grizzly bears and lions, and honestly wolves too, do a wonderful job of avoiding us when they can, right? But they can take a horse down. It's incredible. They go for the trachea and then they clamp down.
Wait, I thought it was more their method was to go back in the neck.
They can. They'll wrap around and close the windpipe off till the animal stops kicking.
Okay.
If you're a big male and you can crack it in half, you bet. But, you know, even that's why a young cat, if it's young and naive, is a potential threat to a human when they haven't learned to hunt, because, you know, we're pretty soft. And even a 60, 70-pound cat. I had a woman called me, I'm blanking on her name, that got attacked last year in Seattle. She was with 3 other women and they were all mountain biking. And she sent me a picture and they're all you can Google, it's on the news. They're standing on a bike, standing on the cat. And it's clearly a juvenile cat, but it roughed her up pretty good. And she survived, did everything right. There's nothing else she could have done, or the group. It's just every now and again, the random stochastic events happen, and when, you know, millions of people are in their habitat, you know, it's going to happen. But it's incredible how it doesn't happen that much.
I really appreciate how in the back of the book you have the section on like how to help the mountain lions, and then also the section where it's like living with them and what to do for them. It's like that's always good information to have all the time, everywhere, especially out here in Colorado, obviously.
My recommendation for anyone out west is bear spray. It works on cats, works on humans, it works on everything. And you just have to know how to use it so you don't deploy it on yourself. It's pretty powerful.
I'll ask the next question. So one of the book chapters, you do like a really great deep dive into the hunters and then the vote with lottery hunting and the different people that were kind of in the room. And then again, down in South America, having that very similar dynamic. What was that experience like trying to work with these multiple stakeholders, and how did that create your outlook for working in conservation in the future?
So that's what, you know, I'm pretty proud of the relationships I've had to build over the years in what I call conservative and rural demographics, human demographics. And that's no different in Chile and Argentina as it is in Montana or Wyoming or Denver, Colorado. So up here, and it's down there too, we as humans are funny critters, right? You know, we have emotions and we have values, and we see our lens, especially when it comes to wild things and wild places, we have a human, emotional, value-based lens, you know, and you know, I like the color purple, you like the color green, those are value statements. Well, values drift into wildlife, whether you're in a conservative rural agricultural scenario or you're in Denver as a classic urban rural divide, right? You have all this urban population is like, how dare you kill a deer, an elk, a bobcat, or a lion? You know, I mean, there's just those are human values that, and the agencies up here in this country, by statute, their job is to, those hunting laws are on the books. So their job is to set those seasons with the best science they can and do no harm. And that's the goal by a governor or commission. This is where politics come in, is to reduce an elk herd. They're eating a rancher out of house and home. Like sometimes they have a goal to actually reduce populations. But for most states and most species, it's to allow that take and not hurt the population. Because every mammal has a discretionary pot of mortality that can, you know, animals die, roadkill, hunting, you name it, management, removal, conflict, and the population is still going to be stable or growing. So what it is, what's interesting is the human component of that. And so working with hunters, it's an exercise in trust building, and it's no different than working with ranchers. Now I could play the card a little bit. I grew up on a farm, but that only goes so far. When they start, you know, probing, pretty soon they find out I'm surfing at San Diego, and then that's out the window, right? and being from, you know, California has its own stigma to it, right? It's a wonderful state, but when you're on a ranch, you know, that's not the first thing you bring up. I actually do now, just for the entertainment value. But those relationships with the hunting community, when you're involved in setting seasons or protecting animals, or the ranching community would take, they're slow to build. They can take, you know, years to build and 30 minutes, 30 seconds to lose. And so, yeah, that chapter was a little bit of a preview for biologists. I wrote that on purpose because I wanted to tell that story for people, you know, women and men coming out of school, whether it's a bachelor's, master's, PhD, doesn't matter, before they go into the field, you know, you're going to encounter situations like that. And they don't train you that. They don't teach you that in most undergraduate or graduate programs. You have to learn by trial by fire. And you're either going to like it or you're not. And so I kind of had fun writing that chapter, and with the editors at Patagonia, you know, and I had brilliant editors. The only reason it reads well is I had brilliant help. I'm a scientist, right? We write boring peer-reviewed science drivel. I had wonderful coaches like Doug Chadwick. He's one of the best, right? Anyway, they were like, we're going to write about hunting? We're going to write about public meetings? I'm like, oh yeah, because that's reality. I don't care whether it's grizzly bears or wolves, whatever species in this country. And honestly, it's the same thing with livestock loss in Patagonia with sheep and cattle and generations of, well, it's interesting. So now I have these European, you know, I work a lot with indigenous populations, Blackfeet tribes here, Salish and Kootenai, 30-year relationships. And so when I went down there, I'm like, okay, where are the indigenous people? Well, they were eliminated. And who's left is relegated to this almost gaucho, like a support staff service industry role. It's really bizarre. And, you know, so those kinds of relationships as a biologist, you have to like working with people. And that's why I wrote it. So just to give you a little peek into this human part of wildlife science, and I'll use the word management. If you're a population manager, you manage populations. That's what they do. If you're an ecologist in one sense and you just do research and that's it, that's what you do. But there's a human component, and even the most, you know, pure academic, non-management, just hardcore science, you're going to have to meet someone in your study area. You're going to have to get permission to go on a property to radio collar that cat. And so I wrote that just so, you know, students would realize, and I've gotten a lot of feedback. It's kind of fun. That's out there. You can get as involved as you want, or you can avoid it, but it's out there. What I will say, conservation is durable and it can be permanent if it starts at that local level and conservative and rural, if you get their support, it's going to last. If you fly in and fly out, it can be undone. And so anyway, it was kind of a real world, real life scenario in an agency kind of chapter, but it was fun to tell. And some people were, I have good memories. They're like, good Lord, that really happened? Oh yeah, they had drinks in each hand and they were, they're loaded for bear and you're the target. You represent those animals, you represent government. And when you're a scientist in a government job, whether it's federal, state, or tribal, you're the target. And so I wanted to kind of share a little bit of that.
I loved it. I thought it was fantastic because we don't, like you said, hear about those things in school. And unless you're in the field and doing it, depending on the species too, you might not have that level of involvement, especially working with carnivores.
Yes.
Which is just, it's just so cool that it's like, hey, let's just get around and have some beer and talk it out and be friends, but also get to the goal, I
always told my fisheries biologist friends, you're lucky fish don't crawl out of the river and eat hay out of the haystack and they don't kill people or livestock.
Exactly.
They're hard to count because they're underwater, but it's a whole different dynamic. But yeah, and what I would say too, so whoever listens to this in your world at Rewildology is that it's also fun to work with the people. Some of the most treasured memories I have are, working with people and bringing them information and watching them learn. And because we're all a product of our family cultures, generational in some cases.
What do you think most people are misunderstanding about mountain lions?
Well, anymore, there's been a lot of, information that has, shed light on behavior, population, whatnot. I think when I think of back east, when I think of where you're at, Brooke and East, there's a push now to reintroduce cats, and they were there. I think it's going to be a challenge because the human value set is really going to come into play. And I don't like to use the word tolerance because, especially with producers, agricultural landowners, because that's like a forced term is tolerance, right? You're forcing me to tolerate something that eats my cattle, whether it's a bear or a cat. But it's living with mitigating the impacts of living with a particular species. So back east, that would be, in the case of lions, how are you going to help me if these things cause a problem? And I think that's going to be interesting as that plays out. But it's good. There's going to be all sorts of surprises, especially when you get into the imagine way back in the recesses of our monkey brains. It's like sharks. When I was surfing and I knew there were sharks down there, and I didn't have to worry most of the time, but boy, I did. Every now and again, you see that shadow and your feet. I longboarded, so I put my feet up on my longboard. I could sit there. But now I go back to San Diego. The Marine Mammal Protection Act passed, and now you don't have the tuna fleets killing all the harbor seals and sea lions at work. There are sea lions and seals everywhere. So many you can't even swim on some beaches. Well, if you build it, they will come. Now there's white sharks, and there's juveniles typically on shore, but now it's not uncommon to go out there and be surfing with white sharks. That wasn't the case when I was a kid. And that's a new dynamic. And for me, in my wild imagination, it's a whole new thing. And the juveniles are usually fine. But when I think of a young, dumb cat or a young, dumb bear, where they're exploring and testing, you don't want to be the subject.
Suddenly my brain is just processing the idea of young, dumb. I'm thinking like equivalent of a teenager. So I'm thinking teenage bear, teenage panther. Like, dude, look at this new land out here. And
and honestly, it's usually a male, young dumb male, like humans.
Hi. I read the book. It took me like a week because it was so good. But I enjoyed this chapter.
Yeah.
The Kodkods, is that what they are?
Yep.
They're super cute. Were we talking about this? I don't remember. But are
No, I
they?
posted it on my story because I was like,
Really?
what is this Kodkod? This might be the cutest cat I didn't know existed.
Yeah.
And Jim, I even think you saw it in my story and you liked it because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm learning about this Kodkod. What is this? And it is, yep.
Yeah, they're
Yes.
just so cute. And are they only in, I read it weeks ago, but are they only in Patagonia?
Yes, well, so pretty far north. They're in the more so here it would be like the Olympic Peninsula kind of. So when you drive down, northern Chile, northern Argentina, way north, it's like Amazonia, right up by Paraguay and Brazil, the wet, and then you got the dry Chaco. But on the Chilean side, it's dry Andean stuff, right? High. But as you get about halfway down or a third down to where they call it Patagonia, it's just a region. You start particularly on the Andean divide, and it leaks over into Argentina on the dry side. That wet habitat with those monkey puzzle trees, and they have those southern beech trees, and they got this incredible dense understory. That's where those cats are, and they're very difficult to survey. And my friend Martin Monteverde, who I talk about in the book, he's been up here a couple times. He was, when remote cameras came out, he was working around Bariloche in Argentina, and he was picking them up in the Lanin Volcano Park. It's a real cool park on the dry side, but that's the beginning of the habitat, and then it flops over into Chile where it's really wet, and that's where they're at. And they go all the way down in that temperate zone. And oh god, there's a word, Araucania. I'm blanking on there's a zone down there by Puerto Montt. That's where that's it. Yeah, it's a zone, and it's a real wet, cool, productive zone. That's where Pumaline Park is. But no, they're cute cats. It's surprisingly they have those colo-colos. They have an Andean mountain cat. So the big point in that chapter is based on genetic work, Melanie Culver, there's some brilliant geneticists, right? Started with Stephen O'Brien, started in Europe, but Stephen O'Brien messing around with cheetahs, and then Melanie Culver, and in the advances in the tools, in the genetic tools. Now we got CRISPR, right? It's really come a long way. But as those tools became available, Dr. Culver started playing with, cats. And turns out, genetically, the crucible of wild felid evolution is Brazil and the Brazilian highlands. And all these species that are felids radiated out based on DNA, north and south, and became what we see today. We have 3 up here. We actually have a jaguar and a jaguarundi kind of thing, right on the border. We'll see how long that lasts with the wall. But we have the lynx, the bobcat, and the lion, and in South America there are many more. And so my whole goal with that chapter is just kind of celebrate the diversity of cats down there that are native and wild, and in some cases endemic. And the other cool thing is that habitat where it's very wet. If you picture the whole river in the Olympic Peninsula on the coast, all the ferns and just very lush green, that kind of habitat, they have these little small bizarre creatures in Patagonia. Clear down the other side of the planet, they have a fox called a Darwin fox. It's in miniature, and it looks like a corgi to me, like a native wild corgi. And because I had a corgi, and in fact, our corgi's name was Fitzroy because all the Argentinians, sent in postcards. That's what the kids named him. But anyway, they have a corgi. They have these small cats, and it's just an interesting biodiversity down there. That if you're a biologist, ecologist, it's really entertaining and fascinating. And that chapter was to celebrate, some of the people doing the work, but more important, just that, hey, there's some really neat stuff down here. We tend to be a little America-centric at times, and half the goal of that book is to say, this is every bit as cool or cooler.
I love how so far you've shared how a couple of the chapters have like very specific audiences in mind. What inspired you in general to write this whole book, and how did you decide out of your lifetime of stories which ones to put in the book? I'm sure that wasn't an easy process.
I haven't told so many people this. So I was with Chris and Doug Tompkins in what is now Patagonia National Park. It's Chilean park, but it wasn't then, and it was back in the earlier stages. And Doug, we were sitting at the table, and I'd been out with Christian Saucedo all day, end of the night. Chris and Doug would go in and out. They're building all these parks, which I'll talk about that too. It's incredible what they've done and what they went through to do it. And in the end, now they're celebrated, but didn't start out that way. It's very similar to parks up here, but and I want to talk about fortress conservation up here versus down there because it's different, 100%. Our history and the history down there, because they're actually creating new opportunities for indigenous peoples and locals. Depending on how you define locals, right? So that book, Doug kind of shamed me into it. We were sitting there having tea at a wooden table, I'll never forget. And there's Wanako's walking around outside, and Doug's like, "Why don't you write up your stories?" And he'd heard Christian and I just BSing, and he knew they flew Christian and others up, and they knew, mutual friends. And I said, I told him, I said, I'm still a government employee, I can't do that. And he looked at me and he said, "Jim, you're either an activist or you're an inactivist." And I was like, oh my God, he's shaming me. He totally did. And Chris is just smiling. And he goes, "Yeah, and, tell the story about, Christian and what," he told me, he goes, share, tell him. He goes, "The world needs to know what's going on down here. It's hard to work." And I was like, okay. And so anyway, I thought about it. And Rick Ridgway is a real good friend of mine. He's retired. He was with Patagonia, another mentor, incredible climber, human. Anyway, I got back after one of the trips down, and I talked to Rick, and he's like, yeah, no, you write him up. We'll publish it. So I kind of got asked to write him. So then I got home, and I was the regional wildlife program manager. Man, I had a lot of staff and a lot going on, and this is going to be interesting. But I'll tell you what, when the time comes where you want to write up some of your stories, do it, because there's a little switch in your brain that kind of flips. I sat down with a laptop, a MacBook, one of those earlier ones, and 7 at night, by the time I get home, get something to eat, and I started writing, just a brain dump. And for me, it was first person, just because I've been very fortunate on different adventures. And I thought, I wrote a little outline, and I gave it to Doug Chadwick, who you had on the show, right? And Doug looked at it and he goes, "Oh God, content off the charts. Yeah, go for it." So I just did a brain dump. It took 30 days. And I went over to Doug and I gave him a Word document, and I printed it out, and I said, "Doug, here it is." He goes, "What?" He goes, "You done?" I said, "Yeah." Anyway, he looked at it and read it, and he goes, "Oh my God, the content, Jim, it's off the charts. Needs a lot of editing help." He goes, "You got darlings in here that need to be cut out left and right. You got, and the point is, I got it to Patagonia, and Carla Olson at Patagonia Books is incredible. She's built an incredible book team, and she started working with me with editors, and away it went. So it took 30 days to do the mind dump onto paper, but it took 5 years almost to, yeah. By the time you do the real editing and polishing and photos and maps and everything it takes, and references, because I had to own every word. I was in a public job working for a governor. It was Governor Bullock in Montana at the time, wonderful governor. I was a civil servant. I was a public servant. I had to own every single word, because I knew in a public meeting that someone could pick up that book and read it and try and embarrass me or whatever. So I was very scientific almost. And at the same time, I thought, what the heck? I'm going to tell the stories. They want to see belly fur, is what they said. I was like, okay. So I wrote, some of them were a little more uncomfortable than others, getting stuffed in with a yak in the bar and a gun. And I was like, okay, you just open yourself up to get teased, right? But in the end, I'm glad I did, because I think it made it a little more human and readable. So anyway, 30 days initially, 5 years
Wow.
for the product. Yeah. And there's a fun thing, Melinda Schnards and Rick's wife, Jennifer, who did all the Patagonia catalogs through time, the photos, and she passed tragically, several years ago. But she's the reason it looks good. She laid it out. But what they did, they called and they asked me, "What's the exact measurements of a paw of a puma?" And I gave them the female. Anyway, if you open the cover, the dust jacket, it took me a month. They waited for me to see it, and I never saw it. And finally, they told me. I opened it up, and I went, "Oh, that's cool." So that was kind of fun. But Jennifer Ridgway and the whole Schnarf, the whole team at Patagonia, Carla Olson and Stephanie, who that connected us. they're very good. But yeah, 30 days to 5 years. That's what I tell you.
Wow.
And I've written science papers and popular press and magazines, and it's a whole different thing when you write a book. It's another endeavor, but it's super rewarding and satisfying. And I would recommend it for all of you when you get to that point.
It's such a beautiful book. I mean, the maps in it, I'm a map person. I love seeing maps and all the maps and all the photos. It's just like, wow, it really helped bring your stories to life and made me feel like I was there with you, which I think all of us that have read it, feel probably similarly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, maps. I'm a map freak. I got maps all over. In fact, I could have put more in there, but it's a balance. It's not my call. When you write a book, it's the editor's call. It's the publisher's call. It's not yours. And that was interesting too, because not that I'm a control freak, but you kind of like, you got your own idea, and then you go, oh, we'll tell you too with editing. Here's another lesson I learned, right? Because I'm a little stubborn. And every time I was told to rewrite a chapter by the editor, I had Michael Jameson, Joe Glickman. I had 3 editors. Joe passed halfway through the book, and another tragic story. But all these editors say, Jim, you need to rewrite it. You need to keep writing. They go, anyway, I go. Finally, I get so mad, and I come back, and then I'd read it and go, dang, it's better. So if you're a real writer and that's your craft, I have a profound new respect for real writers. I'm not a real writer. I'm a biologist. There are some real writers out there that know how to tell you to redo it until it's better. And here's the other thing I was told. You have a phone and you have a TV remote in each hand. Why in the world should I turn a page in your book when I can go to my phone and go to my TV remote? It's got to be that quick. And I was like, whoa, how do you do that? So anyway, these editors really make the book. And now when I read other books, it's like,
pick up on a lot of things
it's a team. It's a team.
Yeah.
Is there going to be another book?
I've been asked that a lot. And honestly, probably. I've done so much. What I'd like to do, I've done so much work with grizzly bears and wolves, and people only see what they see on the news, and they don't know what happened on the ground in the communities. And I'm doing more. There's more stories I'd like to tell about, my friends down there too. In fact, I'm going to talk about that when I'm down there next, or 2 months. But yeah, probably. There's some different angles. So if you notice the theme in this book, it's not only, a little, ecology of cats and other species, but the theme is connectivity in the land and connectivity in human, right? Do you tolerate them, whatever, all those. That's kind of my theme. So the theme, I haven't landed on a theme, and that's very important, because for me, I want it to do good if I'm going to spend the time to do it, and it's not it's not a Fortune 500 paperback bestseller. I didn't put any sex in there. I didn't put romance, or that's how you make the millions. Science is harder to make entertaining, right? And enjoyable. But again, the Doug Chadwicks of the world are masters at that, and these editors really helped. And so, but yeah, I'm open to it. I just don't have the mind space right now. I'm helping land trusts. It's like I need to retire. I'm doing good though, because every project these land trusts do, these conservation easements, they're on the ground, they protect migrations. They're going to be here when I'm dead and gone. So it's kind of permanent conservation, and it's worth my time. It's like creating a park. And I'd like to get back to the park, because I heard a lot of the folks in your age class, and not to pick on anyone, but I'm the old guy on the team, right, in my nonprofit, and I hear fortress conservation, and that's a big deal up here, because indigenous peoples, they were created for good reasons in many cases, not 100%. National forests were created for good reason. We were annihilating everything during colonization. Not only did it annihilate indigenous peoples and cultures, it annihilated wildlife, it annihilated land. It was a very much hardcore industrial European mindset as it hit the West. So when I talk to my tribal friends now, thank goodness there is a national forest or a park that we can reconnect with, our ancient cultures that have been passed down and peer reviewed in their own way, their tribal science for millennia, there are still wild spaces where they can reconnect and see and be inspired. So, fortress conservation is a tricky thing, right? How do you involve humans in the national park creation? How do you involve that in a state park? How do you involve the human component, the indigenous human component in a refuge, right? So that's a challenge we're learning here. Down in South America, it's fascinating because pretty much European mining conglomerates, some extremely wealthy industrial partnerships owns a lot of giant ranches. All of those Tompkins parks, there were agriculture places that went up for sale that they bought on the market. People, age out, die, kids want to cash out, you name it. But they also bought mining conglomerate. They were owned by Europe. So what they did, they created all these parks in Chile and Argentina that now, whether you're rich or poor, with or without means, indigenous or local, for 200 years, it's a real interesting mix of human demographics down there. It's different than here, where we're grounded by our native peoples here. They're still here. They were slaughtered down there, more so than even here. And just heartbreak story after another. And the Tehuelche, the Mapuche, but there are people left. And these parks, they don't have public land. We have Forest Service, we have BLM, and we have individual state school trust lands. They're not a park, but they're not private. They're that in between that all of us own and manage collectively. We can go on them without asking permission. They don't have that in Chile. They don't have that in Argentina. It's either a ranch or it's a park. So if you think about creating those parks down there, what the Tompkins team did, and that involved tons of Argentinians and Chileans. They hired locals. They've created a space now for everyone without means that would never be able to enjoy a wild place, because they're not a trophy hunter paying from America or Europe or a tourist with that kind of money. They've created a space where people can get married, they can take their families, they can have reunions, they do funerals, the little communities around. So it's a change, and it's never accepted because it's a change. And they get, like here, you're accused of producing predators in a park, and they go out and eat everything on a ranch outside the park. That's never going to go away. But all those locals down there, indigenous and non-indigenous, have a place to go where it's not going to cost them anything, and they can enjoy wild nature, where they were shut out prior to those parks. So yeah, they were fortress conservation. They were bought, and some people thought that was arrogant, took money. But as an ecologist, even taking the humans out of it, what an incredible thing they've done. But even if I put the humans in, now Chileans and Argentinian residents, rich or poor, they have those parks. It's up to the governments to protect them, because they can always change with any given president, right? They can become whatever. But what an opportunity, what a treasured opportunity for people, everyone, all walks of life down there now, to call them their own. So I think, when you look at wealth, European, American, or wherever, how do you use that? It's incredible that the Tompkins, Chris and Doug, took their entire savings account, bought all that, and gave it to the two governments. Gave it. And man, they went after Doug and Chris both the whole time when this was happening. But in the end, now they're honorary citizens and celebrated. So it's just, the lesson is the long game. But also, I just want to talk about the fortress conservation, because that's a big deal up here too, right? So not to get squirreled, but
no, I mean, it's amazing. It's just what they've done it's unheard of. It's like they're the only people that have tried something like that. And I don't know about other parts of the world, but I haven't heard of it happening anywhere else. And it's just like, what a crazy, huge, long process that they had to go through to then give it back to the government, and now have, I loved how you shared about in your book, the people that are from the local communities are now working, and they're tracking the mountain lions and part of the whole park system too.
I think it's going to be a sense of pride for Chileans and Argentinians worldwide from here on out, is, this is what we did. This is what we are stewarding. what are you doing? As we're giving away public lands now, it appears. Hopefully that'll get stripped from that bill. But it's a source of pride, national pride for the South Americans.
Absolutely. And I'll pop in really fast because that whole story is the whole reason why I chose the route of parks for the last season. It is one of the most underrated, incredible stories that we have. Well, one of philanthropy in general, but also of a rewilding story, of wildlife protection, of like you talk about land trust, of connectivity of ecosystems. And there is a lot of pride there. I interviewed so many different people when I was down there, and like the route of parks, it's to the point now where the government is going to be recognizing it as well. Like this is something that was come out of rewilding Chile, and now La Ruta de los Parques is like actually going to be a thing that like the Chilean tourism. It's like it's a thing now. It's no longer just this like dream that rewilding Chile had that was came down from the Tompkins.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's such an amazing story. And then also we talk about like indigenous communities, like when I was down in Cape Forward, that new national park, like the Kalwaskar people are being actively involved in the establishment of that park. And I'm just like this is amazing, talking to Gabby, and like that was her whole role there of like bringing in these communities who are going to be the co-owners or co-stewards of this park. And it's like, oh my God, that's just it's just like one of the best stories. Why is this not like on every single headline? Like, and yeah, there's all this other stuff that we could talk about that makes headlines, but why is this not everybody's headline? Times, CNN, all that stuff. So yeah, it's an incredible story. But with that, we only have 3 more minutes left of this hour. Like these have been flying by. So I will give it to, is there anybody that has like a dying question that you have to ask before we wrap up today? I would love to just give the floor open.
I had something, but Michelle, do you have anything?
No, not at the moment. It's just that the book's been a pleasure to read, and it's been a pleasure to listen to you, Jim. It's really amazing.
Thank you.
Well, awesome. Well, on that, Jim, thank you. Oh my gosh. And I'm going to thank Stephanie again for connecting us. Thank you for writing this incredible book, for coming on. We still need to do our podcast episode because that'll be really fun as well. If we could do a very deep dive into, I mean, you see my tabs? I'm a tabber. Every one of these is probably going to be a question. So I do lots of tabs. But I would also like to announce here our next book for everybody. It's very exciting. It's not even in print in the US yet. So it's that new. So it is The Spirit of the Rainforest, How Indigenous Wisdom and Scientific Curiosity Reconnects Us to the Natural World. It's by Dr. Rosa Vasquez Espinoza. And she is like a Nat Geo explorer. She's won a whole bunch of awards, and she just dropped this book. She is an Indigenous scientist. This book, it explores like both views, from like a scientific view and from her Indigenous background view of like of connecting with the forest. So very excited for that. It's going to drop in the US on July 29th. So we have a little bit of time, everybody, if you want to go read some dark fairy stuff. Speaking of Jim, you want to go read the summertime books. And then on July 29th, this book drops in the US. If someone's listening and you're in a different country, like it's because it's based in the UK, you actually might have access to it already. And then we will have Rosa at the meeting. And so it's going to be a different date and time because she's in the UK. So I will be sending out a poll to see when everybody's available. So it won't be at this standard time. It'll be at a different time, which is exciting. That means hopefully we can get some of our Dutch and French and British and Australian friends to join because they haven't been able to join us yet. So that'll be really exciting. But yeah, so The Spirit of the Rainforest, brand new book. Please follow Dr. Rosa Espinoza on social media. She's a beautiful human. I've already met her. She's lovely, lovely, lovely. And so I'm excited to for us to support her and everything. And speaking of support, everybody, if you could, like, go rate and leave a review for Path of the Puma. By all means, I know that that would help Jim a lot, and it has already a good rating on Goodreads and all those platforms. But please go on and do that as well, so that we can give it a little boost too. So yeah, Katie, am I forgetting anything?
No, I think that's everything. Jim, is there anywhere else you want us to follow along with you and your journey and what you're up to?
You know, I have a website. Patagonia helped put up a website called pathpuma.com. I just put updates, but you have my email. I love giving bad advice, is what I tell people. Anytime you have challenges, you know, regardless in your careers, if you're in conservation, I'm happy to give my bad advice at any time. So just reach out.
Oh, awesome. I'll also put the Path of the Puma in the chat so James and Michelle can have that. But we're so thrilled that you were here to join us, Jim. I mean, I can tell you're a people person. You're an animal person, but a people person too. And so are we. So we're just so glad that you were here to share a little bit more of your story with us tonight.
Awesome. Thanks for the invite.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jim. And thanks, everybody. We will see you in a couple months.
Bye.
Definitely. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Peace.